new rear bumper. Maybe I should cut the top. So, in the previous video, you would have seen me taking off the USDM crash bar and a few other pieces on the S2000. And what I installed there was the JDM crash bar. And that's in preparation for this guy. So, this shouldn't really come as really a surprise to anybody that's been following the S2000 build. You should know that I've been kind of going towards that ASM Yokohama direction. And this is one of the big final pieces for me, the ASM Aero Rear Bumper. So this one is obviously the narrow body one because my car does not have the rear over fenders. The wider one actually has kind of the extension for the rear fenders built into the bumper. So it meets up with the rear flares. But for me, I want to stay stock body. I don't see myself going wide body anytime soon. And I hope not to, because the last thing I want to do is cut into the S2000. Kind of my philosophy with the build is to keep it largely reversible in case things do come up and life happens and I need to sell the car, which I don't really plan on, so don't worry about that. But yeah, this is the new rear bumper. For those of you that know, my front Aero ASM bumper I got was actually used. This one doesn't really pop up that much. I was kind of waiting to see if there was a used example that would pop up, but ultimately I got a pretty decent deal through First Gear Project, which is the shop that I usually order a lot of my parts from anyways. So they kind of hooked it up. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to put this on because this is kind of one of those last bigger pieces in terms of what I had envisioned for the car. To give you a little bit of backstory in terms of why this would be called the Aero bumper per se, the factory S2000 bumper actually acts like a really big parachute. So it's really bad from an aerodynamic standpoint. Essentially, you have air going in through the rear wheel wells and kind of catching it because there is no outlet through that bumper other than the exhaust tips. Whereas with this guy, you can see on the side here, there's vent cutouts. There's vent cutouts at the bottom as well too. So this one is kind of a lot more aerodynamic in terms of how it's designed. And ASM actually offers two different types. I'll put the two kind of up on the screen. So obviously there's this one that you see, and then there's a different version, which actually seems to be, like they both seem to be pretty popular. I ultimately went with this one because I think it looks a little bit more aggressive and kind of fitting with how the theme of the car that I want to go with. Whereas the other version looks very almost OEM plus. And in my mind, this looks pretty OEM plus too, but ultimately just a little bit more aggressive and kind of the style that I was looking for. But yeah, so ultimately all that work that I did previously was to be able to test fit this bumper. Apologies for my neighbor who's working on his car too. Hopefully the audio isn't too bad and you can still hear me just fine. But yeah, it is interesting to note that this bumper does mount to the car differently than the factory rear bumper. So maybe I'll kind of give you a bit of close-up in terms of what those differences are and where we go from here. So in typical ASM fashion, give you instructions. This is all in Japanese, and I don't really think it's super necessary. And this one kind of is telling you exactly where the hardware pieces go and what you actually need to remove from the car, so that's what I was doing in the previous video. And here's the baggie of all the hardware too. So the biggest difference with this, and maybe I'll show you the stock one. So the stock bumper actually attaches to these brackets that are basically right here on the side of the car, but the new bumper doesn't use them, which is a little bit confusing to me. So I'm gonna have to do a bit more digging because these holes, they're probably accessed through the trunk because I can't get them through the rear wheel well, but we'll figure that out. And if we go over to the bumper itself, that actually fits up into threaded inserts right here along the edge. So there's 3. They'll actually thread in through basically what the holes I was showing in the chassis itself. So that's gonna be one difference. Other than that, everything else is pretty much the standard mounting points. There's the side, I don't even know what to call this, basically the wheel well area where it attaches, and then the bottom 2 points, those are all on the factory car as well. And then basically up here, the factory points that kind of made up to where the trunk area is. But yeah, so it should be relatively simple. I don't know if I'm gonna show it, maybe I will. But ultimately, I just wanted to test fit this bumper. It should fit pretty well, assume like with all the other ASM parts that are on this car. But I just wanted to make sure that everything fits, see if there's anything that needs to be trimmed. One thing I think that I will need to is basically, on my car, the rear fender tab was relocated because of the wheel fitment. So I'm probably gonna have to do that. I might just basically mock it up next to the factory bumper because that one's already been cut and modified, and kind of do a similar cut, which kind of pains me because this is a nice new part, but we gotta do what we gotta do to have some nice fitment. So yeah, I think I might just throw this on the car, see how everything fits. Basically, I just wanted to check everything before I send it off to paint, because the last thing I want to do is modify a freshly painted bumper. So it's a little bit easier when it's in this raw state right now. Okay, for bumpers. Let's see. Line up. That's the best way. That's all I want to do is this way. Happy bumper didn't seem that way. This one's like a lot. So maybe a two-person affair. I think basically there needs to be some flex. This other side got to line up properly. It's okay, so on the North American bumper, there's a hole right here that lines up with the bumper itself. I'm now noticing, this is where I was getting caught up, and I'm now noticing the hole on this bumper is actually a significant amount higher. So I don't even know if I can actually use this hole anymore. So because this is getting caught up, I wonder if I have to cut this, which I don't necessarily really want to do, but that might be our only option. Gotta think. You might realize why this isn't fitting. Let me show you.